Greetings, YouTube. Today I'll be talking about this book, which is the Skeptic's Guide to American History. This is a course guide. It is part of the Great Courses series. Topic history, subtopic modern history. Very specific. And I really like the fact that the cover has the 34-star American flag, which I think sets a nice precedent for the book itself, because it's taking on something that most people are not familiar with. Most modern Americans don't even consider the fact that our flag at one time had different stages. Some may be vaguely aware that there was a 13-star flag way back in the beginning, in the 18th century, but most are not aware that between then and now we have had multiple flags. This was written by Professor Mark A. Stoller of the University of Vermont, and I saw this at I think it was a thrift shop I saw. And I read a little blurb on the back, and it says, Professor Mark A. Stoller is Professor Emeritus of the History of the University of Vermont, where he specializes for almost 40 years in U.S. diplomatic and military history. He received the B.A. from the City College of New York and his M.A. and Ph.D. from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Widely recognized as an expert on World War II history, he has served as a presidential counselor to the National World War II Museum, as a member of the U.S. Army Historical Advisory Committee. Those were pretty decent credentials. Now, I'm a big fan of the books Lies My Teacher Told Me and Lies Across America. In fact, I have given out multiple copies of both of those books to people. Mostly Lies My Teacher Told Me, because I find that in thrift shops fairly often. In fact, I think I've got one copy sitting over there waiting to be given to somebody. I don't know who. So the idea of another book dealing with the Skeptic's Guide to American History appealed to me. Now, that's not a very big book, but what this is a series of actual lectures. So you're essentially transcripts of the lectures that this professor gave. No, I get this at an antique shop. I think I paid $2.40 for it. So we got here for the lectures, we have Religious Tolerance in Colonial America, ? Neither American nor revolutionary, ? The history of the Constitution did not create a democracy. Washington, failures and real accomplishments. Confusions about Jefferson and Hamilton. Andrew Jackson, an odd symbol of democracy, and did not belong in our currency. The Second Great Awakening, enduring impacts. Did slavery really cause the Civil War? The Civil War actual turning points. The myth of laissez-faire, capitalism, obviously. Misconceptions about the original populists. Labor in America, a strange history. Myths about American isolation and empire. Early progressives were not liberals. Woodrow Wilson and the rating of presidents. The Roaring Twenties reconsidered. Hoover and the Great Depression revisited. What did Roosevelt's New Deal really do? World War II misconceptions and myths. Was the Cold War inevitable? The real blunders of the Vietnam War. Myths about America. Who matters in American history? And history did not begin with us. And then there's a bibliography at the back. Now, the reason I read you the chapter titles for all of these chapters is I wanted to show that the author starts in the 18th century, at the very foundations of our nation. And then he moved forward in time till now, or 2012, I think, when this book came out. And again, it's not a big book. So how did he cover this much material in such a concise manner? Precisely. He covered it precisely. He did a wonderful job of going just deep enough to give the reader, or the listener, the information they needed to understand each chapter, each lecture, fully. At the same time, revealing his underlying message. He's talking about the myth here, and then he's also talking about the message he's actually trying to get. And the message he's trying to get goes from chapter to chapter. And you really have to read this book in order, because he frequently refers to previous lectures. So while each is short, and this is a great book if you don't have a lot of time, it's very simple to read a single chapter in like 10 or 15 minutes, and you're done, depending on how fast you read. So this is very good for that. It's small, you can easily carry this with you without any difficulty. And he did something in this book I wasn't prepared for. I have no problem with drilling down into something to get all the details on the topic. I have read books dedicated to cold, to salt, to fish, codfish, to coelacanths, to the color mauve, to taxidermy. You see, books focused on one topic to a great degree and to a great depth. I have no problem with that. There is something I've encountered, though. When I do that, I tend to lose the context of how that topic is relating to the whole world sometimes. By going deeper and deeper and deeper, like digging in the ground, yes, you're getting somewhere, but you're blocking your view around you. This book, because it was giving me very precise information in a chronological order, and none of it was occupying my mind to too great a degree, allowed me to see connections that I had never seen before. It was almost like I was seeing transparencies on top of each other, like those invisible, like those body symbols you would sometimes find in science books, where you get person, you take a layer off, just take the skin off, and you take the muscles off, take the organs off, and you're down to the skeleton. Or if you're using Photoshop, you're probably familiar with the concept of layering things. Well, that's what this did. So I was able to see as I'm reading the book. Yeah, 18th century, late 18th century, early 19th century, mid 19th century, late 19th century, and I'm seeing how he's layering these things. And it gave me a sense of context that I've never had before. I would love to hear this guy talk. I may poke around on YouTube and see if I can find one of his lectures available, because frequently you've discovered that lecturers will put their stuff up after a certain amount of time. And the Great Courses is something I've heard of before. I actually own some DVDs on a DVD of lectures on the Vikings, which I haven't got around to watching yet, but I do own them. So I'm going to see if I can shag down any more of these books, because again, convenient, good size, and if they're any close to being as good as this, I mean, obviously it depends on the professor doing the lecturing. Not all professors are created equal. It's going to be well worth my time. And I can tell you right now, if you are a history buff, or you want to have an idea of American history, that's actually talking about history, not the myths, not the propaganda that's being pushed by mostly the conservative sets in America, but the actual history, this is a good book. I would also like to say that I was concerned that the author may be pushing his own political agenda. So I walked in here with my own skeptical goggles on to make sure that he wasn't pushing things. And I'm very pleased to say that I don't think he was. I don't think he was trying to put forth any of his own political positions. And it was refreshing to see that. Because sometimes you can see, for someone who says, I'm going to reveal the truth, and there's almost, okay, whose truth? Because sometimes there's the real truth, the actual truth, capital T, and sometimes there's the truth with lowercase t, and that's a little more plastic. I really enjoyed this book. It was a good read. It was a fast read. And again, I think it'd be very good for people who don't have a lot of time to read, because each chapter is short, or each lecture is short, so you'd be able to read it quickly. It'd be interesting to see if I can actually read the thing at the same rate that he gave them. Because I don't know if I could do that or not. Because of course, he also would be having more of a dynamic connection to his audience in the class than I, who was a completely passive consumer of this. So, if you're a history buff, if you're a skeptic, I think this is a book that you're really going to enjoy. I know I did.